Well, Bob, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But
thank you, Dr. Nick. I appreciate you having me on with you.
Before we go into the future of leadership, maybe learn a little bit more about your own journey and can you tell us, where did you grow up?
Yes, I grew up in the Boston suburb of Natick, Massachusetts.
Right.
And yes, and I've been living here in Florida for the last 30 years.
Okay. And tell us, what was your dream career when you grew up?
Well, I grew up loving to play baseball, and so my dream career would have been playing third base for the Boston Red Sox. Okay. However, I lacked one very important thing, and that was any kind of talent. So that was not going to happen. Then my other thought was that I could be a sportscaster. And I actually did that on radio for a little while, and then I was on television, but I soon graduated into sales, which is where I really found what I love to do. Okay.
So where did you start your sales career?
It was in the Midwest United States. And I actually started out by selling television and radio advertising, and then went to a couple of other jobs, and eventually was a sales manager of one of the companies and began to teach other people what was working for me. And what I did when I first got into sales was I didn't have any kind of sales knowledge, so I started reading books by, back then, this is almost 40 years ago, people like Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins, and going to seminars and listening to, back then it was audio cassette tape programs, and just learning as much as I could and applying what I was learning. And eventually people started asking me to show them what was working for me. And out of that, a speaking career began to grow.
And Bob, tell us, how did you discover the Go-Giver concepts?
Well, I was brought up by a couple of parents who, it's how I would describe them as go-givers. That's not maybe the word that I would have used back then. It's not a word that I would have thought of, but really they brought so much value to everyone whose lives they touched. So I grew up with a great example. And then, as I got into sales, I began to realize. And at first, when I got into sales, I was like everyone else who was just starting out. And that is, you think it's about the product, you think it's about the service, you think it's about closing the deal, you think it's about, but really what you begin to learn is that it's not about you. And it's not even about your product or service. It's about the other person. And I first learned that very specific concept when I had been in sales for a couple of years, and I was starting to do well. I had a lot of potential, but I wasn't doing nearly as well as potentially I could have. And I remember coming back to the office one day after missing a sale, and one of the people there, he was not even in sales himself. He was an elderly gentleman. He was about to retire. He was in the engineering department. And I think he maybe saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he said, "Burg, can I give you some advice?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "If you want to make a lot of money in business," actually he said, "if you want to make a lot of money in sales," he said, "don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target," he continued, "you'll get a reward. And that reward will come in the form of money. And you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, the money is simply the result of hitting the target. It's not the target itself. Your target is serving others." And that is what really made the shift. That was the turning point for me, because that's when I realized what sales was really about. It was about discovering what the other person wanted, what the other person needed, what the other person desired, mainly what the other person valued, and then bringing that to them through my product or service.
Now, Bob, your mentor seems very much like the character Pindar in the Go-Giver. Am I right?
He does. When you think about it, he sure does. That's something Pindar would say. And of course, in the story, law number one in the Go-Giver was the law of value, and that's exactly what Pindar was telling Joe, the protege, that you had to take your focus off yourself, that you had to really move from what we call an I focus or a me focus and move to an other focus, looking for ways to make the experience all about them. So that certainly made its way into the story.
Well, Bob, I've been reading the Go-Giver over and over again. It's such a profound concept. And I believe you have extended it from sales into leadership, and obviously now, I believe, also into influence and social media.
Huh. Thank you. Well, I was very fortunate to work with a great co-author, John David Mann, who also was an entrepreneur before he was a writer, and he's a great leader. And so it's been great, this collaboration. We've been able to put our experiences together and come up with a story that hopefully has brought value to people.
And tell us, was there a turning point in your career? Or what was maybe the mentor? Was that the turning point in your career?
Well, one thing that was very important for me to learn was when I went from salesperson to sales manager, or, what should be called sales leader, I wasn't a good leader at the time. I was a good salesperson. I was a good producer, but I was not a leader. And I didn't even know, what that was even about. I didn't know enough to know that I wasn't a good leader. And so once I realized that, then I began to study leadership and began to read books and listen to programs and find out, watch the people who were doing the right things. And certainly in my career, I worked for people who were doing the wrong things in terms of leadership. So I think there was a point, a big turning, I would say a second turning point for me was when I realized that leadership was a thing. And that it was a very important thing to understand.
And Bob, can you tell us what is driving you today?
Well, I think it's to bring the message to people that the message of the Go-Giver, of the Go-Giver leader in our next book, The Go-Giver Influencer. It's that message that if you will focus on bringing value to the world around you, both individuals and to the marketplace as a whole, if you focus on being of value, not only is that a pleasant way to live life and conduct business, it's a very fulfilling and financially profitable way as well. And that's a message that we want to bring to people. It's also understanding that you can communicate with people in a way that you can be yourself. You can communicate in a way that's tactful, in a way that's kind, without sacrificing your values. And I think right now in the world, at least, right now in the States, we're really going through and I don't know if it's where you are as well, but I know we're going through a thing where not only are people so divided politically and in so many other ways, but the lack of respect people are showing to one another, whether it's online or what have you, has really gotten out of hand. And we'd like to bring the message that, hey, you can disagree with people, but you don't have to be disagreeable. You can communicate again in such a way that it advances life as opposed to, to bringing it down.
And Bob, would you agree that the way we treat each other is almost an indicator of what kind of future we're building?
Well, I think it is. I mean, everything starts with a thought and then it turns into action. And the way we communicate with one another is a form of action. So I think it's something we all need to work on. And don't get me wrong, it's always, been like this to a certain point. But the good that we want to do is hopefully bring the message out there that, again, when you're tactful, when you're kind, when you're gracious, that should not be confused with a weakness, not at all. It's that it's actually strength. My dad has always said tact is the language of strength.
Okay.
And I so totally believe that.
I like that. Now, Bob, I saw in your biography you are a great animal advocate. Can you tell us a little bit more about your love for animals and maybe what it means in terms of leadership.
Well, I do love animals. All animals. I just love them. To me, they are pure and they're good. And
Yeah.
there's I don't, for an animal to act in a way that is negative, they have to be trained to do that. But their natural, their inclination is to be good. And I just have so much love and respect for animals. In terms of leadership, you see it all the time when you watch animals. One of my favorite videos, I blogged about it several years ago. There was an older dog teaching what I would guess is his younger brother, a puppy, a new puppy in the house, how to walk down the stairs. And so it was really funny because the puppy was afraid to walk down. So the big dog got up, he was on the ground floor. He walked up the stairs and then walked down to show the puppy. And then he kept doing it until the puppy kept doing it patiently. He didn't get mad because the puppy wasn't catching on. He didn't get mad because the puppy wasn't doing it fast enough. He just kept repeating the message until the puppy began to come walk down the stairs. And the puppy did a great job. When we got to that last step, he was having trouble just negotiating that last step. And the older dog kind of took him by the collar and just gently pulled him along. Oh my gosh. I've never seen such great leadership in human beings, never mind in animals.
So is it fair to say that dogs would be the ultimate go-givers?
Well, I think they are. I think they are, because remember, they are a huge givers. They'll do anything for their humans and for other animals they love, but they'll do anything for humans, but they'll also receive, right? When you start scratching a dog behind the ears or rubbing the dog's belly, they're not saying, oh, no, I don't deserve it. No, stop that. No, they're going to let you scratch their belly or behind their ears for as long as you will do it. So yes, they're wonderful givers, but they're also excellent receivers.
And I believe they have one customer for life.
Yeah, exactly.
So Bob, let's talk about leadership. What does the future of leadership mean to you?
Well, I think we've been seeing a big transition. We've seen it go from that top-down command and control leadership that has always been so prevalent. This person's the boss. That's their position. They don't care about you. They care only about what you can produce. And if you don't, I think we've gone from not that we still don't have that, believe me, there's still much too much of that. But I think it's changed a whole lot. There are now many more people who understand that when the leader focuses on bringing value to their employees, treating their employees well, helping their employees grow, that's not just being nice. That's good for business. Because, an employee will work for a paycheck, but they will not commit for a paycheck. It's
right. Got
to be something more. Daniel Pink did such a wonderful job in his book, Drive, What Motivates Us, when he talked about, people wanting to have autonomy. They want to feel good about themselves. They want to be able to learn and grow. I think that today's leaders are beginning to understand that. Now, I also think leaders are more and more, sometimes they want to depend on technology, and yet the best leaders understand that it will absolutely never be about the technology. It's always about the humans that you're dealing with. And the leaders who know that are the best leaders, and they're the ones who are going to be most effective. Jeff Colvin, in his wonderful book, Humans Are Underrated, talks about that. That the old question used to be, what can humans do that technology cannot do? And as he says, that question is no longer relevant, because at this point, technology can pretty much do everything that human beings can do. However, there are many things that other people want from other humans that they will not accept from machines. And so you've got those skills, commonly thought of as soft skills, though I don't think they're soft at all, but like empathy, like collaboration, like teamwork, and those things. And the leaders who get that and lead through that, they are going to be in the future as well as in the present, the top leaders.
So is it fair to say, in your opinion, that we have to elevate our humanity to catch up with technology?
I think that's very accurate. I think with many people, they do need to do that. And so we realize that we need to realize that technology is a means to an end. It's a way to make things easier for us to accomplish what we choose to accomplish, but it's only a tool. I have this saying that has made its way through every single book I've ever written or participated in writing. And that saying is, all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to, and we can add, will allow themselves to be led or influenced by those people they know, like, and trust. Well, it's the people they know, like, and trust, not the computers they know, like, and trust. So it always eventually comes back to people. And there are those who give that lip service. You'll hear them say, or you'll see the slogan, you'll hear the slogan or see the signs around the company that say, people are our greatest asset. And yet, if you ask the people working there, if that was the culture, they might say, no, not at all. But those leaders who create a culture where that is actually congruent, again, those are not only the happiest companies, but they're the most productive and profitable as well.
Absolutely. So Bob, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
Well, in my own journey, I would say that Dale Carnegie had it right 80 years ago in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he said that ultimately people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So the great leaders are constantly asking themselves questions such as, how does what I am asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals, their wants, their needs, their desires? How does it align with their values? How does what I want this other person to do, how does it make their lives better? And when we ask ourselves these questions, Dr. Nick, when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully and intelligently, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another person into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning other people's commitment as opposed to having to depend on compliance, because compliance is never long lasting. Compliance can only take you so far, because once a person doesn't feel they have to comply, they are no longer following you. I love what one of my great friends, Dondi Scumaci, a great teacher, speaker, author on leadership and influence and team building, what she says. Dondi says, compliance will never take you where commitment can go. And I think that great leaders understand that they accomplish great things with other people.
So I take it that commitment is the key quality that determines the quality of our relationships.
Well, I think the quality of our relationships is what determines commitment. So if the relationship is really not there, you're not going to have their commitment. But the relationship comes first. The relationship, right, if it's will turn into either compliance or commitment.
Right. Now, Bob, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what do you tell them they should focus on for future-proofing their career, if that is possible?
Well, I would say first, read, listen, learn about leadership. And there are great teachers out there. Whether you're reading books by John Maxwell or you're reading the Leadership Freak blog by Dan Rockwell or Jessie Lynn Stoner, her books and blog. I mean, there's just Lolly Daskal. There are so many wonderful leadership speakers out there. Steve Gutzler, so many. So, read and learn, study leadership. And then I'm going to suggest this, that what you have to give Okay, you offer least of all through what you say. Now, don't get me wrong, what you say is very important. We have to, again, speak to people with kindness and tact and respect and edification. Absolutely. But what you say is least important in terms of what you give, in terms of your leadership. More important, of course, is what you do. We know that. But most important, Dr. Nick, is who you are. And that's where character comes into play. Character comes from an old Greek word meaning scrape or scratch. It came to mean an engraved marking and eventually a defining quality. We could say that the sum total of all one's qualities is their defining quality or character. Now, it's interesting. When we really understand someone's character, we can predict with accuracy what they're going to do, what their decisions are going to be. I don't mean the mundane decisions, but I mean the values-based decisions. It's not that a person of high character doesn't make mistakes. Of course they do. It's not that they don't course correct. They absolutely do. And it's not that they won't be flexible on strategy. That's very important. They'll be flexible on strategy, but when it comes to those values-based decisions, they are absolutely immutable, unmovable, and unchangeable, and that's why we trust them. So when you can develop your character to the point that it isn't what you even, it goes beyond what you say and what you do. Those are just aspects of your character. But when you are known as a person of high character, that right there is leadership and influence.
So would you say that future leaders should focus on continuously developing their character?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Now, Bob, let's talk about technology. What would you say are the key technologies or tools of technology that future leaders should be embracing?
Well, we never know what's going to be in the future. Well, some people probably do. Those are the futurists who get that stuff. I really don't. But I would say this, just to understand that it's not the technology itself that drives leadership. It's how you utilize that technology. And that starts again with who you are. Right. And it starts again with how you're going to effectively lead and influence others. So you can be on Twitter. I see great leaders who have a big presence on Twitter, and they're able to get their message out on Twitter. But they could get their message out on any social medium, and it would still be the same message, right? So it's really, it's not so much the medium, it's the person themselves. But it's also good to be able to tap into those technologies that help you spread your message in the most effective way to the most people.
And Bob, can you tell us which social media platform have you been using to promote your message?
My favorite is Twitter, actually. And again, even when I use Twitter, I use it as a means to an end. I don't make it about Twitter. I make it about adding value to those who with whom I'm connected on Twitter. And so I find it's an excellent medium for me to use. I also utilize Facebook and LinkedIn quite a bit. I'm not really well versed on the other ones. So, you know, that's mine. But I think a lot of the platform you use is what's congruent with the way you enjoy communicating. But here's something I really suggest: when you, regardless of the platform or the medium you use, is make sure that you engage with people. In other words, whatever the platform or the social medium you're using, it's not to broadcast, it's to engage. And so watch for when people comment back and engage in the conversation. Now, that doesn't mean you should be, letting social media drive your time and productivity. Not at all. We have to make sure we're careful not to do that. But we need to, we need to make sure that we're not just broadcasting from a perch and saying, this is my message, listen to it, right? It's a matter of engaging and learning. And before every tweet or every post or every comment or every response, the question we want to ask ourselves is this adding value to those with whom I'm communicating?
So it's still the go-giver mindset that we should apply. Thank you. Now, Bob, you've been a mentor to many aspiring leaders. You are an inspiration to many future leaders. Can you maybe share with us a success story or two where you mentored somebody personally and that person took your message to heart and went on to considerable success?
Well, I love the feedback I get from people who maybe they first started by you're reading one of my books and we ended up connecting, and maybe they asked a couple questions and I maybe gave them some ideas, and they took the ideas and they ran with them and they applied them and they did it. And it's always so funny because they'll credit me, right? And what did I do? You know, I mean, I provided some ideas and some feedback, but typically, you know, it's they who did the work, who took the action. So there have been a number of people who, you know, have credited utilizing the ideas from the Go Giver, the principles, in order to really build their business. So that's always yeah, it's always a nice compliment to hear.
And Bob, who are the role models of leadership, or maybe books about leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and learn from?
Well, one book I would suggest everyone buy is called Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Okay.
And this to me was a book that encompasses pretty much everything we need to know to understand what leadership is all about. Now, that doesn't mean you should stop at that book, but that's a great initial book. I also, one of Dr. John Maxwell's first books, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. That's another one, which, again, gives the overall and great helpful information, just like Simon's. And then there are books, you know, you get a book such as Everybody Matters by Bob Chapman. And Bob is the president, the chair and CEO of a huge manufacturing company in St. Louis in the US called Barry Waymiller. They're huge. And he absolutely has developed the most outstanding corporate culture I've ever seen. And his book, Leaders Eat Last, I mean, not his book, Everybody Matters, is just so fantastic. Anything you can read on Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines. There are just so many wonderful, wonderful books out there. Marshall Goldsmith has great books. Lolly Daskal, who has The Leadership Gap. There's just so many. You can make a huge study of it, and that's what I suggest people do.
And Bob, where can our listeners connect with you, and how can they follow you?
Well, the easiest place to go is thegogiver.com, without the hyphen in this case, thegogiver.com. And while they're there, they can join the Go Giver movement. They can subscribe if they'd like to the Go Giver podcast. They can get chapter 1 of the Go Giver Leader, and several of my other books. And they can connect with me online, you know, connect with me on social media as well.
Right. And last but not least, Bob, what is one thing you would really ask our listeners to take to heart and implement in their own leadership?
Well, that word implement, that's so important. And, you know, we always say there's people who think, Dr. Nick, that the opposite of a go-giver is a go-getter. And that's not true. We love go-getters because go-getters take action. Now, the neat thing is there's no natural division between a go-getter and a go-giver. Many go-getters are also go-givers, and we would say every go-giver is also a go-getter. So we like people to be both go-getters, people of action, and go-givers, people who are totally focused on giving value to others. When you put those two together, it's fantastic. The opposite of a go-giver is a go-taker. That's a person whose focus is on taking. But what a go-giver realizes is that the action is important. And this is why we say that money is simply an echo of value. Leadership is influence is an echo of value. So what I ask people to do is focus, implement, bringing value to other people. And remember one thing, that it's not what we think is of value or what we think they think should be of value. It's what they feel is of value. Value is always in the eyes of the beholder. And the only way you can know what another person, holds to be of value is to ask them and then listen.
Right. Well, Bob, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And thank you so much for being an inspiration for leaders across the world. And to keep on being an inspiration through your series of The Go-Giver. So I hope that there are many more Go-Giver books to come out. And I would really like to thank you for helping us to build the future.
Dr. Nick, thank you, and thank you for all the great work you're doing. You're really making a difference.